Anyway, my name's Chris. My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic, and Ali. Thank you for inviting me. What a great meeting this is. What a great format. What a great direction this meeting aims us in, because that really is the gold ring, that conscious contact with God. Now, I didn't understand that, when I first showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was just trying, I was just trying not to get in trouble anymore. I was trying to survive alcoholism. I was drinking myself to death. I had let everybody down that you could let down. My world had gotten so small. I was in a room in my mother's house, divorced for 10 years by that time, not able to see my own kid. I mean, it was just, my world was small. And I show up in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, here's the thing. The fellowship at that time, it was like 1989, right? The fellowship was perfect for me. It was filled with lunatics. I mean, we just crazy stuff. We were dating each other. We're going to sober dances. The slow, painful root canal kind of sober dance. We're going out to diners, and everybody's in the car. You never showed up at a meeting, where it's just you in the car. We were nuts. We were nuts. And I got to tell you, for me to go from, my problem is I lack a coherent connection to a power greater than myself. For me to go to where I believe that really is the solution to the issues that are in my life, to my alcoholism. It took me a while. It took me a while. The spiritual appendix says, some of us have a spiritual experience that's slow, that happens, educational variety. It's slow, happens over the course of time, and slowly over the course of time, I started to apply some of the principles that Alcoholics Anonymous taught me. But today I do absolutely believe that the solution to everything is this conscious contact with the divine. The experience of being in unity with the divine, and it took me a while, but I'm convinced that some of us come to believe, and I came to believe over the course of time. But here's what I believe alcoholism is today. I believe when I separate from alcohol, that's when my alcoholism hits me. And what it is it is a toxic experience of self-consciousness. That's how alcoholism hits me. And I'll show you a little bit of what it looks like. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that yesterday. I can't. And that guy, what he said to me, what I should have said. I'll tell you what I should have said. Tomorrow when I go to work, I'm gonna have some words with her. I can't believe, they're treating me this way. And she left me. She left me when I needed her most. And everybody did. There's no loyalty. There's no loyalty anymore out there. I can't believe it. What is going wrong with the world? That's how a toxic experience of self-consciousness would work with me. And I show up in Alcoholics Anonymous like that. And I don't like you, and I don't like the meeting. And, he's raising his hand again. Oh, damn it. What is he raising his hand for? He's a blowhard. He's just going to share a bunch of crap, I was like that guy. It was just emanating off of me, this toxic experience of self-consciousness. And that, I believe, is what the real problem is. My life is unmanageable. I've got to admit that. I've got to admit that I'm an alcoholic. Absolutely. So fundamentally, deep down inside, I have to fully concede that I'm an alcoholic. And then I get an opportunity to come to believe that there's a power. There's a power that I can connect to that will solve my problem. My first example of that was all of you. I'm in these AA meetings and somebody's raising their hand. I'm celebrating 3 years. I'm celebrating 5 years. I had to believe, that there was something going on in the rooms, and you all locked me in. Whether I liked the meeting or not, there's something about it that I knew that I needed to stay. I knew I needed to stay. I didn't understand a lot of things, but I got a sponsor. I got a home group. I started going to meetings, and I started to believe that there's something. I don't understand it, but there's something that's happening to all these people, and I'm sticking around for it. In step 3, my first view of step 3 is, what are they talking about? Make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. What does that even mean? I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of Fish Food Phil, my sponsor. I can kind of understand that, because he's got some good advice. He's been right about, practically everything he's asked me to do has ended up being a positive experience for me. So, but I don't understand, God. So what I had was, the thing that blocked me off from getting this stuff right away, was my old ideas. If you said God, something would pop into my head that you didn't mean. Like I had an old idea. I had an idea of this, this entity up in the clouds of heaven and this white robes, taking a list down of all of Chris's sins, and if this God is interventionary, if this God is omnipotent, he's like a cosmic Alan Funt. You know what I mean? Like he's like, hey, St. Peter, watch this. Let's see the Schroeder kid, get drunk, take 4 Quaaludes, and drive up to the police station to ask for directions. This will be great. Because if there was something that was omnipotent and there was something that was interventionary, he's playing a role in the disaster of my life. So these are some of the old ideas that I show up with. And thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous, because it gave me room to let go of these old ideas so that I could move forward with something more compatible to spirituality. And again, it happened over the course of time, especially, the step work of step 4 through 9 was transformative for me. In gaining a feeling and in gaining a belief that there is a spirit. There's a spirit that I can live in I can live in the spirit and not in this toxic experience of self-consciousness. So the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous and everything, what it did for me was it brought me from that self-consciousness to the God consciousness they were talking about when the meeting was starting, and that is such a change. It's a revolutionary change in the way I think, in the way I behave, in my perspective, in how I treat you, in how I see the world. It's just, and they're not kidding when they say in the big book, we were reborn. So this process of the first 9 steps, the process of really staying connected within the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, having a sponsor, having a home group, really trying to do my job in Alcoholics Anonymous, all of this has brought me to a place today where all is well. All is well. There's so many things I could. I'm just going to share one current experience, and then I'm going to do the job that Ali is paying me to do, which is to read out of read a little bit from step 11. But I want to share a little bit of current experience. Okay, so about 3 weeks ago, I get a call from my niece. that my sister is in the hospital. They found her, she lives alone, and an aide came over and found her all crumpled up. And what had happened was her intestine had perforated, and they rushed her off to the hospital. They did an operation. Now she's got sepsis, and she's on a ventilator, and there's machines beeping and everything. This hospital in her area saw this as such a science project that they shipped her off to the Bronx. There's a hospital in the Bronx that they found for her. Okay, so she's in the Bronx. I go in there and I visit her, and just every kind of machine in the world. Now she's got, they call them coexisting morbidities. All right, what that means is she's diabetic. She's had like 6 heart attacks. She's had like 5 quadruple bypasses. I could go on and on and on. Just a walking disaster. And for her to be on her back on a ventilator there's not going to really be a great outcome coming out of this, right? So I go in there, and it's a touchy situation, but I wanted to get clear with what my sister wanted. The niece couldn't do it. You know what I mean? That's too hard of a conversation to have. But I said, look, option A, you get you've been on the ventilator for too long now. They're going to give you a tracheotomy, and they're going to do all this stuff, and that's option A. Option B is what's known as a terminal wean, which is they take you off everything, and they medicate you, and they sit back and they see how you do. Maybe you survive, maybe you don't, but you don't get like 700 machines for like the next year. What do you want to do? And I was able to have that conversation with her and find out what she wanted. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is that if she would have ended up in the hospital when I was drinking, I'd have made it about me. Damn it, my sister's back in the hospital. Now I gotta get in the car, and I hate hospitals. I gotta go visit her. That would have been me. But what's happened with this process of the steps is I've been rendered useful, which, it's a surprise to me, that I'm useful, but I'm able to have that conversation with her because I can. I'm spiritually sound, and you've taught me not to fear the hereafter. That's one of the promises in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't fear the hereafter for me. I don't fear the hereafter for you. We go to the great reality, whatever that is. We go to the real fellowship of the Spirit, whatever that is. I'm certainly not afraid of it, and I can have that conversation with my sister, and I can make sure that she gets what she wants, because she couldn't move. I had to do it on a whiteboard with her nodding and everything. But that's just some current experience. But I never would have been able to do any of that, without this transformation that's happened through the process of the steps, consistent meeting attendance, sponsorship, being of service, figuring out how to be of service. So, am I grateful? Am I grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous? You're damn right I am. Now, I'm gonna do my job. All right, the topic that I picked was, it's a sentence at the end of step 11 from the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And this particular sentence kind of felt off for a long time for me. I didn't really understand. I thought maybe it could be worded better or something. But today I have a different view of it. And what the sentence says is, we alcoholics are undisciplined. So we let God discipline us in the simple way we've just outlined. Now, what does that mean? Discipline. Discipline is a word that certainly I had old ideas about. Yeah, it wasn't a word that I was comfortable with, because from second grade on, when I started getting in trouble in school and becoming a little criminal, I would be disciplined by the principal, and it just has a bad connotation. This word discipline, but really a way to look at discipline. A way to look at discipline is like this. Discipline is one of the most important personality traits in everyone's life. It refers to a set of rules and regulations which are to be followed while undergoing any task or activity. It's a way of being honest, hardworking, motivated, and encouraged while doing any task. Now, that is something that I didn't have when I showed up here. I was about the most undisciplined person in the world. I'll give you some examples. All right, I joined the Boy Scouts. I went on one camping trip and quit. I started taking guitar lessons. I took 3 lessons. I stole the guitar and never went back. I joined the wrestling team. I did 1 practice and quit. I mean, for some reason, I thought if I didn't feel good about something or want to do it, I didn't need to do it. The whole time I was in school, from 2nd grade on, I never did homework. Not a bit of homework. Never even homework. Never brought books home. And if you do that, what happens is they put you in the remedial classes. They put you in the work study classes where you go to the wood shop. And that's what happened to me in school. Now, I'm not a dumb guy. I come from a very, very smart family. My brother and sister are both college professor PhDs. My mother and father were both Phi Beta Kappa from University of North Carolina. I mean, my whole life, the normal life when I was like, 8 years old was coming home and my father would be reading a Scientific American and my mother would be reading a New Yorker magazine or something. It was just like an intellectual family. Now, how could I have gone so far in the other direction with schoolwork? It was because I was convinced I need to do the things that I need to do that are good for me. And I'm making the decisions on what's good for me. And slowly I get exposed to alcohol. I get exposed to all kinds of other stuff. There's non-conference approved stuff that I got involved with, which was a little bit crazy. And I look back on it, and it was a completely undisciplined life. Now, what are they talking about with discipline in the 11th step? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. They're giving us exercises. They're talking about an exercise called Upon Awakening. And then they talk about when we retire at night. And then there's some instructions about how we should approach and how we should react within the day itself. And these are all spiritual principles. These are all spiritual exercises that I'm being asked to become disciplined at. Now, here's the thing. I couldn't beat alcoholism. I couldn't separate from alcohol. I couldn't fix my own character defects. I couldn't change. I couldn't change until I got exposed to some of these spiritual principles. And you know what? They're change agents, these spiritual principles. They create the environment wherein change can happen. It's like the more of these things we practice, the more we place ourselves in the sunlight of the Spirit. The sunlight of the Spirit comes in and does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And a lot of times it's hard to understand. A lot of times it's difficult to come to believe. A lot of times when you're working with a newcomer and you're trying to explain this stuff, they it goes right over their head. You got to just keep them going to meetings and making coffee for a while, But this stuff, if it becomes a discipline, in my life, I am going to be the beneficiary of the results of that discipline. Now, here's the thing I've learned being in Alcoholics Anonymous for 30 some years. None of us do a good job at this, okay? I've not met one person that I can honestly say, does this stuff like clockwork. I just, and I think part of being human and part of being an alcoholic is there's a download in me. There's a default setting in me that blocks me off sometimes from happily engaging with these spiritual principles. I'll give you for instance, I've done 70 amends. Every single one of them, I've gotten a great response, a generous response. But this 76th one, I know this one's going to go bad. I know I'm going to end up in jail or look stupid. Like it's this default setting that fights against embracing these wonderful spiritual principles that will revolutionize my life, place me in the sunlight of the spirit where God can do for me what I cannot do for myself. What is the matter with me? Why am I resting on my laurels? Bill Wilson understood us when he was putting all this stuff together. Bill Wilson really understood us. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. But progress I can do. Progress I can do. I can do a little bit more this year than I did last year. And I did a little bit more last year than I did the year before. And can I share my experience with somebody? Yes. Would I share something like, I'm this spiritual being now on another plane and everything, everything's no. There are imperfections in my life out the wazoo, but there's been progress. There's been spiritual progress, and corresponding with that spiritual progress, this year was better than last year. Last year was better than the year before. The year before was better than the year before that. I'm talking about internally. I'm not talking about out there. I mean, 3 years ago, we were making a lot of money, big house, Audis, vacations, all that. And that turned around real quick during COVID. And we had to downsize. We had to go from the Audis to VWs and move, out into the country where it was cheaper. So I could make a case that things are going worse for me. I could put that on paper and it would make sense. My sister's really sick. You know what I mean? I could give you 30 things that would be evidence that my life really isn't getting better. But I'm telling you, it's getting better because it's internal. This thing is internal. It's not external. It's an internal experience. I feel better about life, the world, relationships, this year than I did last year. Now, one of the greatest things my first sponsor ever told me. Remember, I'm a psychotic newcomer, and my sponsor is like giving me little wisdom teachings, trying to keep me from committing suicide. And one of the things he said was, he said, Chris, I am so glad I'm not you right now. Oh my God, like listening to you and watching you and everything. I am so glad I'm not, where you are. I had like 90 days or something. And then he saw he had hurt my very sensitive alcoholic feelings, So he goes, no, let me explain. He goes, I am really glad I'm not at 90 days. He goes, I'm really glad I'm not at a year. He was celebrating 10 years. He goes, I'm glad I'm not where I was at 11 years. He goes, and I'm glad I'm not where I was last month. And what he was sharing with me was the incremental spiritual growth that's available through this process of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was one of the greatest statements of hope I think anybody could have ever shared with me. Now, the 11th step. What's going on with me and the 11th step today? This year, especially, like the last 2 years, I've really tried to hone in on what's available with step 10 and step 11. And I got to tell you, folks, they're 1,000 miles deep. I've been practicing this stuff, not perfecting this stuff. I've been practicing this stuff for decades. And I continue to see that there's more to be experienced. There's more to be experienced. So what, where am I with this? It says upon awakening. So when my eyes open and the minute I'm conscious and realize I'm not dreaming, that I'm actually awake for the day, laying in bed, I go into a prayer thing that, lasts about 4 or 5 minutes. And then I do a meditative exercise that really is based a lot on this book, the instructions in this book. I think about the day. I think about what is going to be going. Am I working today? Am I off today? What are some of the commitments that I've made for the day? What are some of the tasks that I need to? Are there people that I need to call? Are there sponsees I need to catch up with? Is there a meeting I'm going to tonight? I try to picture the day, and I ask God to play a role in this whole thing. Bring me the intuition to do a decent job with all this stuff, and then I get up and I either go to work or whatever. As I'm moving through the day, it asks us to do things like say, "Thy will, not mine, be done," many times each day. There's a lot of stuff about moving through the day, pausing when agitated or doubtful, asking for the right thought or action. There's a ton of things like this. I'm not the kind of person who is mindful of all that stuff all the time. But there are periods of time when I remember to do it. And when I remember to do it, it improves the outcome of the day. So I try to apply this stuff. When I retire at night, I constructively go over the day. Now, how I used to go over the day back when I was drinking would be like, I can't believe I did that, and tomorrow I'm going to have to go to work tomorrow, but we have to have words with the boss. I'm telling you, if he says anything, I'm going to hit him. And if I hit him, I'm going to probably lose my job. I don't want any money. That's how I would review my day. So it's a constructive, all these things are constructive. My first exposure to them was, oh my God, it's like, but they're constructive. So I review my day. Do I owe any amends? And what could I have done better? So what this is teaching me is you've heard this, I'm sure. An unexamined life is not worth living. Right. I forget who said that. I think it might have been Mo from the Three Stooges, but an unexamined life is not worth living. I believe that there's some truth to that. So there's some self-examination that needs to happen. We're taught how to do it from step 4, all the way on. And the more I examine, the more truth I find about what's really going on in my life, and the more distance I get from this toxic experience of self-consciousness, and I aim toward this thing called God consciousness, which I believe is spirituality. I believe the antidote to this whole thing called Chris is spirituality. Spirituality is the antidote to everything that's been troubling me. So some of the other things, I do is it recommends in this. There are some really good books. Ask some priests, some ministers, some rabbis. Ask for some recommendations on books. Now I'm a big reader. I can't tell you how many spiritual books I've read. There were periods of time where I studied first century Christianity for like 15 years. I read all the critical historical stuff. I just went through the whole field. I'm like this voracious reader. I'm almost obsessive compulsive, as a reader. So I've read all this spiritual stuff. The joy of resentment. How to win friends and influence people through tyranny. I mean, I'm okay. There's something wrong with you. The power of later. I've read them all, and here's what I can tell you about what these books have done for me. All right, they've educated me in a lot of spirituality, and they've given me a really good vocabulary to share with people on spiritual topics. The actions I've taken are the things that have transformed me. Now, I would love to be able to learn how to be spiritual. I would love to be able to learn how to have a spiritual awakening. I would love to be able to learn how to have my defects of character removed. But that's not what's worked in my life. Action is what's worked in my life. And these simple steps that were put together by Bill when he was suffering from a depression in his bed, and he took most of the precepts from the Oxford group and put them in the 12-step format, and they're perfect for someone like me to practice, to be able to gain an experience of spirituality. So I think there's two areas where Bill got inspiration for things like the 11th step. One of them certainly was the Oxford group, and certainly was Christianity. Okay, there's not a lot of doubt in my mind that he picked up a lot of stuff from that. But there's also another tributary that I believe he was involved with, because there's stuff in this book that's almost mystical, and that wasn't really the Oxford group or the Christian stuff that he was reading. It's almost mystical, and I believe it came from this trajectory. Okay, in the 1850s, there was this clockmaker in Maine. His name was Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. Okay, and people would go to him. He made clocks and watches and stuff, but people would go to him and they would get healed. Okay, he did like a spiritual psychotherapy kind of thing with them, and a lot of people would go up there and they would come back better. Okay, some of the people, one of the people he worked with was a woman named Mary Baker Eddy. Now, people might have heard of her. She started Christian Science, right? One of the people that got involved with Mary Baker Eddy early on was Emmett Fox, right? I'm sure some of us have heard about Emmett Fox. So what was going on was Ruth Haack loved Emmett Fox and would go and see him at Madison Square Garden in the early 30s. And guess who she would bring with her to hear Emmett Fox? So Bill Wilson is hearing Emmett Fox before the writing of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So I think there was some of that stuff going on. Now, some of the things that really jump out at me today in this book revolve around the third step and get solved in the ninth step. All right, it says that selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. Remember I said toxic experience of self-consciousness? How self-consciousness manifests is selfishness and self-centeredness, right? That's manifestations of the self. It says that self defeated us. All right. So these manifestations of self, the selfishness, the fear, the shame and the guilt, the remorse, the anxiety, the depression, all these manifestations of self are what have defeated me. So going from that to what the 11th step promises us we're going to have an awakened spirit. We're going to be in the sunlight of the spirit. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We are going to definitely understand that we've undergone a spiritual experience. And with this spiritual experience, this awakening, and here's how I define an awakening. And it's very simple. Okay. I'm awake today. I see things as they really are. I just do. Back when I was drinking, it was all about me. I didn't, reality was, I couldn't see reality because it was through a lens of alcoholism and self-consciousness. And I just couldn't see things as they really were. But today I do. I believe I see things as they really are. I can prioritize it, and my perspective is pretty compassionate, and that's kind of where I am today. But what does this stuff do? What does this stuff get me ready to do? It gets me ready to be helpful. And we move into chapter 7, and Bill is giving us a beautiful pathway to being helpful. Who are we perfectly qualified to help? Who are we uniquely useful as someone to help other alcoholics? So I take this awakened spirit, and almost organically I'm moved to help other alcoholics. I'm going to end with this. I'll give you just a small snapshot of the change. I told you about, I'd be really pissed off about, the blowhard in the meeting who'd he'd always raise his hand 5 minutes before the meeting's over. You had to have the last word, you just blah, 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 blah. I'd want to kill myself. I'd get up and go get a coffee or go outside for a cigarette or whatever. I just couldn't stand it, right? Well, in about 6 months, Blowhard missed a bunch of meetings, and I started thinking, somebody should call Blowhard. We haven't seen him in a while. We got to make sure he's okay. And in 2 years, I had invited Blowhard to my wedding. So there's this transformation that happened, almost, without me being part of it. I was able to somewhat become disciplined with some of these spiritual principles. And these changes happened to me. I was released from alcohol. I was released from certain types of character defects. I was released from this bondage of self that they talk about in the 3rd step. And I'm really, really grateful to be here tonight. I want to thank Ali for asking me to come up. It's always fun to see Toronto friends. There's a bunch of people I know on here that I'm really happy to see. So that's all I got.